Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is it's razor sharp. We take a stack of your sources, the best articles, deep research, and specialized notes, and we distill them. We pull out the most powerful nuggets of insight.
We do the heavy reading so you, the listener, can get that deep knowledge quickly and, thoroughly.
And today's deep dive is absolutely essential. We are navigating the very complex terrain of effective language acquisition.
Specifically, we're focusing on English language mastery. And this is about so much more than just memorizing vocabulary lists. It's about understanding the entire cognitive, pedagogical, and strategic framework you need to move from just being competent to being truly fluent.
We've been immersed in a fantastic collection of sources this week. Really, everything from foundational cognitive science, how the brain even manages multiple languages, to the very specific practical strategies used by the world's most successful language learners.
And our goal is to synthesize all of this. We want to hand you a kind of blueprint for mastery, a comprehensive understanding of what really drives exceptional language learning.
Right. And, before we even get into grammar or vocabulary, what immediately stood out from this stack of sources is the incredible global tapestry of English itself.
Oh, absolutely. It is anything but monolithic.
Hmm?
And I think understanding that diversity is really the first crucial step toward mastery.
I found the contrast in the sources just fascinating. We had one background profile discussing growing up in, I believe it was San Diego. English, there was this immediate bridge language. It was dynamic and essential for communities coming together from, Mexican, Filipino, and Vietnamese backgrounds. English was a tool of immediate necessity, a tool for cultural intersection.
Exactly. Now you compare that with another profile we saw, a teacher who grew up in Manchester, England. It's a city known for its industrial heritage, and critically, it's a very distinctive, often quick-paced northern accent.
Full of local idioms.
Full of local idioms. So you have these two versions of English, right? And they operate in vastly different cultural and phonetic landscapes, yet they're both English.
And that contrast just perfectly illustrates the point for you, the listener. Mastery isn't about conforming to one perfect dialect. That's a myth. English is this beautiful, diverse tapestry of accents, expressions, and countless cultural influences.
Recognizing that, I think, it removes so much pressure. You stop chasing this single, unattainable ideal of nativeness.
Yes. And what connects all these diverse contexts? The sources point to one thing over and over: the sheer power of motivation.
One of the papers we looked at, it touched on the experience of teaching adult professionals, people in really demanding fields like tech and finance.
And when those learners saw that direct, measurable connection between superior English skills and their career, maybe a promotion or a specific international project they wanted,
the entire learning process transformed. It clicked into a higher gear.
that direct, pragmatic motivation, it acts as a massive accelerant, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shifts English from being just some compulsory subject you had to take in school to a high-value investment in yourself.
Right. When you have skin in the game, when the outcome is your own personal success, the cognitive doors just open so much wider. That connection between necessity and knowledge makes everything click differently. And that's the kind of mechanical click we're looking for today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Let's start with the really deep question. What does it actually mean to learn a language? We all know the general definition of learning, acquiring a skill, but language, it just feels uniquely profound.
It is, because it's deeply neurological. Our sources describe this beautifully, I think. When you learn a second language, you are not simply, downloading a new set of data onto your existing hard drive.
That's a great analogy.
You are actively rewiring your neural pathways. You're creating new connections, and you're developing an entirely new system for expression that runs parallel to your native tongue.
Rewiring our neural pathways, that phrase really grounds the whole process in hard science, doesn't it? It helps dispel that myth that language ability is just some innate talent you either have or you don't. Precisely. It confirms that it's a profound physiological transformation that results from consistent, directed effort.
And this transformation is what allows us to escape the most common learning mistake, which the sources point to again and again.
Which is viewing English as a simple act of translation. So many beginners, they try to find the English equivalent for every single word they think in their native language, and then they just sort of stitch them together linearly.
And the immediate result of that direct translation habit is speech that, well, it might be technically accurate word for word, but it sounds completely unnatural. It's stilted, it's contextually awkward.
It's the language of a textbook not a conversation.
Exactly.
Our analysis suggests that true mastery, it involves going so much deeper than simple translation. It's about achieving a state where you think, you dream, you feel emotions, and you process new information directly through English expressions.
Without that intermediate step of converting from your first language, your L1.
Yes. When you reach that stage, you've successfully internalized the linguistic system itself. You're not just using it, you're operating within it.
So if the ultimate goal is internalizing that system thinking and feeling in English, how do the mechanisms of learning differ based on when we start? We have to address the findings from cognitive science about adult versus child learning.
This is where the analysis gets truly critical for you as a listener. The research consistently shows that adult language learners rely much more heavily on what are called explicit memory systems.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice, explicit memory?
It means they use conscious rule application, they use their analytical skills and logic to dissect grammar, and then consciously apply those rules in speech. They excel at finding structure and recognizing patterns.
And you contrast that with a child who just seems to absorb language effortlessly. It's almost magical just by being present in the environment.
Well, that's because children absorb language implicitly. They aren't using analytical skills. They're relying on massive, and I mean massive amounts of immersion, social interaction, and simply guessing from context.
So they internalize grammar rules without ever being able to articulate what a prepositional phrase even is.
Exactly. So this raises a crucial question for our adult listener, right? Are you fundamentally disadvantaged because you're using these analytical explicit systems?
And the answer is no?
Not at all. In fact, the sources highlight that adult learners bring tremendous cognitive advantages to the table that a child simply doesn't have. First, stronger analytical skills allow them to grasp complex grammatical concepts much, much faster than a child could.
And second, they have something called metacognitive awareness.
Yes. Let's dedicate a moment to metacognitive awareness, because this is a huge practical advantage. It's a real superpower for the adult learner.
So what does it mean functionally?
Functionally, it means knowing how you learn best, and then being able to actively manage and optimize that process for yourself. It means knowing, for example, that you internalize vocabulary better by reviewing flashcards every morning at 6 a.m. while you're drinking coffee.
Or that you need to visualize grammar rules on a whiteboard.
Right. Unlike a child who just absorbs through osmosis, you can choose the optimal learning strategy for your unique brain. You can design your own learning system.
That ability to choose and implement a strategic plan is a complete game changer. The challenge then for adult pedagogy is helping the adult leverage these analytical strengths, the explicit knowledge, while also finding ways to tap into those implicit, intuitive acquisition processes that are normally reserved for early childhood.
And strategically, the single most important tool for achieving that balance, according to decades of research, is Stephen Krashen's concept of comprehensible input.
Ah, yes. The I+1 formula.
Better known as the I+1 formula.
Krashen's work is absolutely foundational. Okay, let's unpack I+1 in detail. What exactly constitutes comprehensible input?
Comprehensible input is language that you, the learner, can understand, even if it contains a slight amount of unfamiliar material. The key word there is comprehension. If the material, an article, a conversation, a video is too dense, too fast, or just too complex, your brain just tunes it out.
It's just noise at that point.
It's just noise.
Yeah.
But if it's too easy, there's zero growth. You're not learning anything new.
So the sweet spot is that I+1 formula. You're currently at level I, and the input you consume is just a single step above that, the +1.
Precisely. That slight challenge, that +1, it forces the brain to adapt and assimilate the new structures without conscious, laborious study. Think of it like a weightlifter trying to progress. You don't jump from lifting 50 pounds to 500.
Of course not.
You increase the weight by a small, manageable amount, just enough to strain the muscle and force it to grow. Language learning is very similar.
So how does a listener identify their I+1 material out there in the real world? It sounds a bit abstract.
It's largely intuitive, actually. But there are practical checks you can do. For reading material, a good rule of thumb is if you have to look up more than 5% of the words on a page, so more than about one word in every 20 is probably I+2 or I+3. It's going to be frustrating.
And you'll lose motivation.
You will. The perfect I+1 material allows you to guess the meaning of new words or grammatical structures based on the context you already understand. You feel challenged, but not overwhelmed.
And the result of consistent, massive engagement with this kind of material is, well, it's phenomenal.
It transforms the whole acquisition process. Learners naturally absorb complex language structures, things like phrasal verbs, tricky tense distinctions, idiomatic usage, without ever having to explicitly study them from a chart.
It mirrors how children achieve fluency.
It does, but it's tailored for the adult analytical mind, because the content is usually chosen for relevance and interest. Podcasts relevant to your career, specific YouTube channels you love, articles about your hobbies. If they are slightly challenging, they are perfect, I+1. You're learning the language while you're focused on the content.
And that's the implicit trick we talked about earlier, sneaking the learning in.
Exactly.
That strategic push toward implicit acquisition brings us perfectly to pedagogy. If we understand how the brain learns, how should that knowledge shape the way we teach? Let's start by challenging that common assumption that native speakers are automatically the best teachers.
The sources are really unequivocal on this. That assumption is outdated and, frankly, often incorrect. Simply being a native speaker only means you know what sounds right.
But not necessarily why it sounds right.
Precisely. Or, and this is critical, why a non-native speaker keeps making a specific mistake over and over again.
This is where the perspective of the multilingual teacher becomes so valuable, isn't it? Why would someone who learned English as a second language potentially be a better guide?
Because, as one source put it, they understand the learning process from the inside. They have personally navigated the exact linguistic and psychological hurdles the learner is currently facing.
They remember the pain.
They remember the sheer agony of mastering articles, knowing when to use a and they or nothing at all, or the frustration of memorizing hundreds of phrasal verbs like look up, look into, or look over. They've been there.
That internal empathy provides a huge pedagogical advantage. It moves teaching from just correcting errors to truly understanding the source of the error. They can often anticipate the patterns of interference from the learner's native language.
Exactly. So effective teaching, it demands empathy, but it also requires profound linguistic awareness. That's the ability to not only identify what is correct, but to deconstruct the pattern and communicate it in a way that resonates with that analytical, rule-seeking adult brain.
And great teaching, as the sources emphasize, has to be profoundly adaptive. You can't treat every student as if they learn the same way. That's just a recipe for failure.
That adaptability is completely non-negotiable in modern language instruction. We see the need to integrate teaching methods that cater to all the major learning styles. Let's break those down.
Okay, start with the visual learners. They're the ones who need to see the structure, right?
Exactly. Visual learners benefit immensely from organized information. They'll have charts, color-coded diagrams of verb conjugations, mind maps, written examples on a board. For them, a grammar rule isn't solid until they've seen it written down and highlighted.
So a practical tip for a visual learner listening to this.
Take time to transcribe conversations you hear. Use color highlighters for different parts of speech in your notes. Use flashcards with images, not just words. Make the language visual.
Okay, then we have the auditory learners, who grasp the rhythm and melody of the language.
These learners excel through listening exercises, podcasts, dialogues, conversation practice. They might really struggle if you just present them with written rules. But if they hear a pattern repeatedly, they'll internalize it naturally.
So for the auditory learner, we'd recommend something like shadow reading.
Shadow reading is perfect. Listen to a native speaker and immediately try to repeat their exact cadence, rhythm, and tone. Even if you're not 100% sure of the meaning, you're training your mouth and your ear to the music of the language.
And finally, the often overlooked kinesthetic learners. How do they best cement their understanding?
Kinesthetic learners need physical movement, gestures, hands-on activities. For them, language is rooted in doing. This could involve role-playing scenarios, using specific gestures to reinforce new vocabulary, or other physical activities.
Give me an example.
Okay, say you're learning a sequence of events for storytelling. Physically walk around your office or room while rehearsing the different tenses or steps. You're linking muscle memory to verbal memory. It sounds a bit odd, but for a kinesthetic learner, it works because the brain processes movement and language in tandem.
So the overall conclusion for the listener is that a successful learning path has to incorporate variety. You need all four skills: reading, writing, listening, speaking, plus focused study on grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and, critically, culture.
Precisely. If your current study routine only focuses on, say, 2 of those elements, you are neglecting entire pathways to competence.
Now let's pivot to the engine that drives this whole process: motivation. The sources identify motivation as the single most underestimated factor in achieving success. Without it, The best pedagogy in the world will fail.
I recall one anecdote from the source materials where a highly motivated student who was initially quite weak in grammar completely overtook a less motivated student who had a much higher baseline analytical ability.
Just through sheer consistency driven by passion.
Exactly. And that's why teachers have a primary responsibility to kindle and maintain that motivation. And you do that by creating a positive, low-anxiety environment. When learners feel encouraged and safe, they're willing to take the risks they need to take.
Which, in language learning, always means making mistakes.
Always. And those mistakes, as the sources remind us, have to be explicitly reframed. They're not failures. They are valuable learning opportunities.
Absolutely. You have to think of every error as a window into the learner's current understanding, right?
It's a diagnostic tool. If a student consistently confuses the past tense of irregular verbs, that error tells the teacher precisely where to target the next lesson. A low-anxiety environment is essential because the fear of error is the greatest paralyzer of fluency. If you're afraid to speak, you will never get the practice you need.
So if the environment encourages mistakes, then providing feedback becomes a real art form. What distinguishes genuinely effective feedback from just, marking errors with a red pen?
Effective feedback has to be specific, timely, constructive, and most importantly, balanced. It's absolutely critical to first acknowledge what the student is doing well, the areas of successful communication, before you gently guide them toward improvement. That balance is key.
It sounds like a pedagogical tightrope walk. If you constantly interrupt and correct every single error, the learner becomes instantly demotivated. They stop taking communicative risks, which just halts their fluency development.
That's the danger. Constant correction kills confidence and fluency. But the opposite extreme, providing too little feedback, is also harmful. If a learner fossilizes an error, meaning they repeat the same mistake so many times that it becomes an ingrained habit.
It becomes incredibly difficult to fix later on.
Almost impossible in some cases.
So what's the strategic approach for giving feedback?
The strategic approach is selectivity. It's about knowing the purpose of the activity. In a free conversation designed to boost fluency, the teacher should only correct errors that significantly impede communication. The main goal is flow.
But in a focused writing exercise or a targeted grammar drill?
Then the feedback should be highly specific and form-focused. You should address only the structure being practiced. The teacher has to constantly think, what is the purpose of this interaction right now? Is it fluency or is it accuracy? And then guide the feedback accordingly.
Okay, if pedagogy is the guiding framework, then vocabulary has to be the irreplaceable building block. Without enough vocabulary, the entire structure of communication, even with perfect grammar, just remains weak.
That's absolutely correct. Vocabulary development is central to everything. The sources make a very strong case that insufficient vocabulary not only limits your ability to express complex or precise ideas, but it severely limits your ability to comprehend native speakers or engage with authentic materials.
Regardless of your grammatical knowledge.
Right. And there's a quantitative metric here called the vocabulary threshold, which gives you, the listener, concrete goals to aim for. Let's provide some of those critical data points.
Please do.
Okay. Research suggests that for basic, effective conversation and high-frequency communication, the ability to handle daily life interactions, you need to master around 2,000 to 3,000 core word families.
That's enough to survive and communicate your needs? That sounds manageable. It's a great initial target for a beginner.
It is. But, and this is a big but for sophisticated tasks. For example, reading a nonfiction book, engaging with high-level professional documents, or understanding a major newspaper's editorial page.
The number goes up.
That required mastery jumps dramatically. You need 8,000 to 9,000 word families. This is the real difference between speaking casually and operating professionally in an English-speaking environment.
Now that 8,000 word target can sound pretty daunting. This is where we need to highlight the encouraging news, the efficiency focus.
This is the critical takeaway. It's the motivational insight for the learner. The 2,000 most frequent words in English, that foundational block we just discussed, they account for approximately 80% of all the words you'll find in typical non-technical texts.
That's the 80-20 rule applied to language.
It is.
So what does that 80% figure really tell us?
It means the initial grind, that focus on the core 2,000 to 3,000 word families, yields massive functional returns immediately. If you focus strategically on high-frequency, high-utility vocabulary first, you instantly unlock the vast majority of daily interactions. You significantly boost your comprehension, and that makes the subsequent climb to 8,000 words much, much easier.
Smart vocabulary learning is about efficiency, not just volume.
100%.
So let's look at the strategy for selection. Smart learners prioritize words based on their goals. The sources highlight 3 high-value vocabulary categories. Let's start with academic English.
Academic vocabulary, often called the academic word list, is essential for anyone entering higher education, research, or any highly analytical field. These are the words that allow you to discuss concepts and relationships, not just concrete objects.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure, words like analyze, evaluate, demonstrate, significant, adequate, specific, concept, strategy, approach, hypothesis, methodology, and discourse. Mastering these words signals intellectual rigor.
And for those of us focused on international business, there's a different set of professional terms that are crucial to signal expertise.
Absolutely. Business and professional English uses precise terminology that often has slightly different connotations than general English. Think about terms like collaborate, implement, optimize, facilitate, leverage, stakeholder, initiative, benchmark, revenue, sustainability, and scalability.
And understanding the register is key, right? Knowing that these terms are used to sound authoritative and efficient.
Exactly. It's crucial for professionals working in global finance or technology.
Finally, let's look at the vocabulary that makes a learner sound truly fluent. The kind of conversational glue that makes speech flow naturally.
Yes. Discourse markers and adverbs. These are the words that tie your speech together, that convey attitude or express a level of certainty or uncertainty. They are often short words that native speakers just sprinkle in naturally without thinking.
For example?
Actually, basically, literally, absolutely, definitely, apparently, obviously, fortunately, unfortunately, incredibly, sort of, and, as a matter of fact.
I think these are so often overlooked because they don't carry the main meaning of the sentence, but they are absolutely essential for sounding human.
They are. If a learner just uses plain grammar, they sound mechanical. These words add necessary texture and personality to your speech.
And rhythm. They are critical for timing and rhythm in a conversation. Learning how to deploy actually to gently correct someone, or basically to summarize a complex point.
It helps learners sound far more fluent than just mastering a more complex noun or verb.
Okay, now we move from selection to strategy. How do effective learners acquire these high-value words and move them into long-term memory? The sources identify 4 powerful strategies. Let's start with contextual learning.
Contextual learning is paramount. It means you encounter words within meaningful, authentic contexts, a sentence, a story, a dialogue, rather than just isolated lists from a book. It's the difference between memorizing the word strenuous and reading a paragraph where someone describes a strenuous hike up a slippery mountain path.
And why is that context so much more valuable than just memorizing a dictionary definition?
Because context provides so much more. It provides usage, connotation, the implied feeling of the word register. Is it formal or informal? And perhaps most critically for advanced learners, collocations.
Let's elaborate on collocations. This is often the dividing line between an advanced speaker and a speaker who is still translating literally in their head. What are they exactly?
Collocations are the natural, habitual pairings of words in a specific language. Even if 2 words are synonyms, they might not collocate naturally. The classic example is strong coffee versus powerful coffee.
Both adjectives mean intensity, but we almost universally say strong coffee.
Right. And if a learner knows the definition of powerful but hasn't learned its collocations, they might say, I drank powerful coffee, which is grammatically correct. But it instantly signals non-native speech.
Other examples?
Oh, there are thousands. High-frequency pairings like make a decision, not do a decision. Heavy rain, not strong rain. Deeply regret, not very regret. You only learn those natural pairings through vast exposure to authentic language use, which is why contextual learning trumps isolated list memorization every single time.
Okay, moving on. What's the next acquisition strategy?
Next up is the keyword method. This is a mnemonic technique that really leverages the brain's preference for vivid, often slightly absurd images. It involves creating a mental bridge, linking the new English word to a familiar word in your native language.
We saw that excellent example of a Spanish speaker learning the English word bear.
Yes, by associating it with the Spanish word barrel, which means barrel.
So they imagine a huge brown bear stuck inside a wooden barrel.
Right. That vivid, slightly absurd mental image forms a memorable connection that completely bypasses the repetitive, boring process of rote memorization. It makes initial retention incredibly high, It's a quick, efficient tool when you're facing those 8,000 to 9,000 word targets.
Now, for what might be the most scientifically sound approach to long-term memory? Spaced repetition.
This is non-negotiable for true vocabulary mastery. Spaced repetition directly combats what's known as the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Instead of cramming, the learner reviews new words at scientifically optimized increasing intervals.
So maybe after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, then a month.
Exactly. The genius of this system is that it forces your brain to recall the word just at the moment it's about to forget it. And that act of retrieval reinforces the memory pathway at the optimal time.
It's leveraging cognitive timing. Apps and digital tools have made this incredibly easy, managing the intervals for you.
They have. And by timing the review perfectly, you force that vocabulary out of your short-term and working memory and into the durable long-term memory store where you want it.
So we select the right words, learn them in context using mnemonic tricks, and review them scientifically. What's the ultimate test? The moment we know we truly own the word.
That is active production. Passive recognition, understanding the word when you read it or hear it, is a valuable first step, but it's not enough.
Active production is the final boss.
It is. Learners must immediately use new words correctly in their own original sentences, conversations, or writing. That process of generating the word from scratch solidifies it for immediate, fluid recall. That is where real mastery develops.
Vocabulary mastery helps tremendously, but language learning is a marathon, and every runner hits a wall. Let's address the most universal challenge, the intermediate plateau.
The intermediate plateau. It's a psychological and linguistic trap. It's that frustrating stage where learners feel completely stuck because their communication is, adequate. They can order food, they can travel, they can understand simple instructions.
But sophisticated professional fluency remains frustratingly out of reach.
Exactly. And it feels like the exponential progress you made at the beginning has just vanished.
So why does this stall happen?
The stall occurs because the learner gets comfortable. They start relying heavily on those 2,000 to 3,000 high-frequency words that cover 80% of communication. But they stop challenging themselves with the complex grammatical structures and the specialized 8,000-word vocabulary required for high-level expression. They settle into a functional comfort zone.
I remember hitting that plateau myself. I was perfectly fine ordering a coffee, but if a native speaker used a single professional idiom or a complex conditional tense, my brain would just seize up.
And that's the real danger. Comfort kills growth. The solution is self-evident, but it requires grit. You have to deliberately push beyond your comfort zone.
Which means shifting your consumption to more challenging materials.
Exactly. Listening to advanced academic lectures, reading professional literature that's outside your immediate field, or engaging in complex, unscripted debates with native speakers.
And pushing past that plateau requires mastering another vital skill that often goes against a learner's instinct. And that's the skill of tolerating ambiguity.
This is a cognitive necessity. The pressure some learners place on themselves to understand every single word spoken or written is completely unrealistic. And it's actively detrimental to comprehension. It slows them down and it derails the entire message.
So what does a proficient learner do when they encounter unfamiliar vocabulary? They don't panic.
They don't panic. They rely on cognitive shortcuts. Effective learners use context clues, their background knowledge about the world, and inference to grasp the overall meaning. They train their brains to focus on the message, not the dictionary definition of every single syllable.
Fluency means understanding the message and the intent, even if 15% of the specific vocabulary is unfamiliar.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, moving on to the mechanics of sound. Let's address pronunciation. This is often the part that requires the most physical practice because we are literally training new muscle movements in the vocal tract.
It is very challenging, especially for sounds that don't exist in the learner's native language. The sources gave some specific examples of these cross-linguistic hurdles, which are critical for targeted practice.
Right. We noted the struggle for many Spanish speakers who often have difficulty distinguishing and producing the difference between ship and sheep. Those vowel sounds are very close.
Or the significant challenge for Japanese speakers with the liquids, the R and L distinction, where those sounds often merge in their native phonology. Addressing these requires mechanical, focused practice.
So what are the practical tips for tackling these specific sounds?
The sources recommend using mirror exercises, literally watching your mouth, your tongue, and your lip position while you produce the challenging sounds. And the absolute necessity of recording yourself and comparing that recording to native speaker models.
Auditory feedback is crucial because what you think you are saying and what you are saying are often miles apart.
Very true. And the ultimate goal here is to develop something called phonemic awareness. We should probably explain this concept clearly. Phonemic awareness is the critical skill of recognizing that English spelling doesn't always correspond to sound. It's also about understanding the minimal pair distinctions that change meaning. For instance, knowing that swapping just one sound in pin for another creates pan or pan is essential.
This often requires dedicated practice using minimal pair lists. You have to separate the sound from the spelling, which is totally counterintuitive for learners who are used to more phonetic languages.
Exactly. If your native language is transparent, what you see is what you say, then English's opaque spelling system, just think of words like tough through though and thought, it's a significant barrier that requires explicit phonemic training.
Let's shift our attention now to grammar, which is often a massive source of anxiety for analytical learners. How does that fear of making mistakes negatively impact the learning curve?
Grammar anxiety is immensely powerful. It leads to self-paralysis. Learners overanalyze every word and every grammatical structure before they speak, which results in unnatural pauses, heavily edited speech, and complete breakdown of conversational flow.
They prioritize perfection over communication.
And that's a losing battle. This is where we have to draw a clear, critical line between accuracy and fluency and understand the role of each.
Is accuracy.
Accuracy is about grammatical correctness, proper usage of tenses, careful attention to the rules. It's developed through explicit instruction and controlled exercises.
And fluency.
Fluency, conversely, emphasizes communication flow, speed, and the confidence to take risks and get your ideas across, even if the grammar is imperfect.
So we need to balance them. For a beginner, which one is more important?
In the initial stages, fluency and confidence must take priority. The goal is to overcome the fear of speaking and just establish communication channels. It is far better to speak imperfectly than to not speak at all.
But as proficiency increases...
As proficiency increases, accuracy work becomes critically important, especially for those who are entering professional or academic environments.
Why is that shift so necessary?
Because in those professional contexts, writing a report for your boss, presenting research, or negotiating a contract-precise language use is non-negotiable. Ambiguous grammar can lead to misunderstanding, financial consequences, or even safety issues. At that high level, accuracy is absolutely essential for credibility.
That focus on specific professional contexts leads us perfectly to the importance of goal-oriented learning. English isn't just one language, it's 100 specialized fields.
Absolutely. We have specialized fields like English for academic purposes, or EAP, business English, medical English, legal English, and the fascinating world of aviation English.
Aviation English is a great example of a highly goal-oriented field. Why is standardization so critical there?
Well, because clear, standardized communication between pilots and air traffic controllers is literally a matter of life and death. The goal isn't general conversation. The goal is safe, unambiguous transmission of critical information.
So they use a specific set of lexicon and restricted grammatical structures to minimize error.
They have to. The principle here is powerful for all learners. Effective learning requires clear, specific objectives. Vague aspirations like, I want to become fluent someday, rarely lead to success.
Right. You have to identify a specific, measurable objective, something like passing the IELTS exam, getting certified in business English, or confidently leading a 30-minute meeting in English.
Specific objectives keep your motivation high, they keep your focus precise, and they allow you to measure your progress against a tangible finish line.
As we move forward, we have to look at the massive influence of technology. The digital revolution has fundamentally transformed how language is learned, and our sources highlight both the good and the necessary caveats.
Technology is a powerful democratizer. I mean, decades ago, access to authentic English materials was limited geographically and financially. Today, anyone with an internet connection has unprecedented access to authentic, native-level input.
Global news, documentaries, specialized podcasts like this one, massive libraries of content tailored to every imaginable interest.
And the advancements in specialized tools are just phenomenal. We're well beyond simple flashcard apps now.
We are. Sophisticated language apps are using AI, spaced repetition algorithms, adaptive learning technology. They can personalize the pace and focus for every single learner.
They can even identify the exact moment you were about to forget a word or a structure and then prompt you for a review. And the integration of gamification helps maintain motivation during those tedious stages of memorization.
And we can't overlook the revolutionary impact of online tutoring and conversation platforms.
No, this has shattered geographical barriers. Learners who might live hundreds or thousands of miles from a native speaker or a qualified tutor can now connect instantly, often affordably, for dedicated one-on-one practice.
And that live interaction is vital, isn't it? It forces the learner into immediate production and real-time interaction, which is something a book or an app simply cannot replicate.
That said, technology is never a magic solution. What's the crucial caveat to sources stress?
The caveat is that technology is a tool. It's not a substitute for cognitive effort and consistency. The best approach has to blend digital convenience with traditional, focused practice.
So that might mean using an app for your vocabulary review, but then shutting the screen off to handwrite grammar notes or read a physical book.
Which engages different cognitive systems and improves long-term retention.
Exactly. And that brings us to another element that's often overlooked in the rush to master grammar: the intertwined nature of language and culture. You can have perfect verb conjugation, but if you lack cultural competence, communication will still fail, often awkwardly.
This is absolutely critical. Language mastery requires cultural competence, understanding the nuances of communication styles, social norms, humor patterns, and politeness conventions that are embedded in the language.
Let's look at pragmatic examples of how culture dictates speech. Starting with directness.
Yeah.
Consider the difference between communication styles. American business culture, for example, tends to favor relative directness. It prioritizes clarity, efficiency, speed.
Get to the point.
Get to the point. Conversely, British social and professional interaction often employs more understatement and indirect, highly polite language. It relies heavily on implied meaning.
So what's the danger there?
If an American speaker is too direct with a British colleague, they might be perceived as rude. If the British colleague is too indirect, the American might miss the criticism entirely. Both sides are communicating, but they're not understanding.
And what about simple ritualized greetings? Those often trip up learners.
Oh, the American "how are you" is a classic example of a ritualized social interaction. In most casual settings, it is not a genuine inquiry into your well-being.
Right. The cultural expectation is a brief, positive response, fine, thanks, or good, you. Not a detailed 3-minute medical or social update.
Misunderstanding that social contract can lead to some extremely awkward exchanges.
I think this also explains why idioms and cultural references are such huge hurdles. They're rooted in specific, often niche cultural experiences that have nothing to do with dictionary definitions.
Exactly. Think of the wealth of English expressions rooted in sports, particularly baseball in the U.S. Phrases like strikeout meaning to fail, or hit a home run for great success.
Or a ballpark figure for an approximate number.
Right, these are pervasive in general and business English. But without understanding the cultural reference point, the literal meaning of ballpark provides zero help.
So authentic materials, watching media, reading articles, listening to music are essential because they provide this embedded cultural context that no grammar book can possibly offer.
You have to live it, or at least consume it.
Finally, we have to discuss the long-term view. The strategies for sustained progress. As we established, language learning is a marathon. How do we sustain persistence beyond that initial high motivation phase?
The key, according to all the sources, is integrating English into your existing life patterns. You have to make English an integral, enjoyable part of your daily routine rather than this isolated, burdensome study time.
When learning becomes a natural habit, consistency is much easier to maintain.
So it's about incorporating English into passions you already have. If you are passionate about cooking, switch your recipe blogs and your cooking channels entirely to English. If you're a tech enthusiast, follow English language forums and specialized technical podcasts.
This transforms learning from an external obligation into an opportunity that enriches the activities you already value.
Precisely. And to maintain that momentum, especially through the inevitable plateaus, we need effective, concrete goal setting. We have to caution you, the listener, against vague aspirations.
Vague aspirations are the enemy of sustained progress. Become fluent is a meaningless goal. It's not actionable.
Exactly. Instead, you must set specific, achievable, and measurable milestones. For instance, I will read one English newspaper article daily for the entire month of April.
Or, I will write a 500-word summary of a technical paper by the end of this week. Or even, I will engage in 3 10-minute unscripted conversations this week.
Concrete goals provide clear direction. They allow you to track your progress, and most importantly, they provide frequent opportunities to celebrate small victories. And those small victories, the ability to articulate a complex thought, the mastery of a difficult verb, they are the fuel that sustains your motivation for the long haul.
Ultimately, the sources conclude that success relies not just on innate talent or perfect instruction, but overwhelmingly on persistence. The learner who shows up consistently, who embraces their mistakes and adjusts their strategy, will achieve mastery regardless of where they started. So let's pull all these threads together from today's deep dive. We've established that language learning is a profound cognitive act. It's essentially requiring us to strategically rewire our neural pathways while leveraging the analytical strength that only the adult learner possesses.
And it demands high-quality pedagogical approaches. It means using comprehensible input to sort of trick the brain into implicit acquisition, and it requires balanced, specific feedback from teachers who understand the learning process intimately.
And success is fundamentally built on strategic vocabulary development, focusing on high-frequency, high-value word groups like academic and business English, and navigating inevitable challenges like the intermediate plateau, by tolerating ambiguity and consciously balancing the pursuit of accuracy with the necessity of fluency.
Moreover, learning English in the modern context is one of the most valuable investments you can make. It opens doors to careers, education, global information access. Every hour you invest yields compounded returns throughout your life. It makes you a more globally aware and capable professional.
And remember, every expert was once a beginner struggling with articles and prepositions. Progress is nonlinear. Setbacks are a normal, expected part of the process. The real differentiator is persistence and the unwavering belief that you are capable of achieving profound English mastery.
So continue practicing, embrace those glorious mistakes as learning opportunities, and keep integrating English into the passions that already drive you forward.
Before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought that builds on our discussion of cultural embedding and specialized language. We talked about how fluency means thinking and feeling in English. So consider this. What niche cultural artifact, a specific type of English humor, a regional idiom specific to your industry, or maybe a non-textbook social convention within your target professional or social environment, what artifact would you need to master to fully feel at home?
Think about that final essential key. Is it understanding the specific sarcasm of a regional workplace? Or knowing how to use understatement effectively in a British context? Identifying that specific cultural goal is the next layer of your deep dive.
Thank you for joining us for this essential deep dive into English mastery. We'll see you next time.